Hey Stripe Youth, it's Phillips with RZIM again, coming to you with another answer, hopefully to some of the questions that you guys have been having. Duan sent me this one recently, and it really is grappling with the question of God's sovereignty and free will, and what's the relationship between the two? Can God really be sovereign and we have free will, or if we have free will, can God really be sovereign? Obviously, this is a pretty big discussion amongst the church in general. If you've noticed, you probably come from different families. Some are going to be probably on this side, which would be more the Calvinist reform, which is they're going to emphasize the sovereignty of God and predestination. Then you got the Arminian side, which says, well, we're going to emphasize free will. But I will say this, they both agree to an extent. They agree that there is sovereignty alongside free will. The question is, what does that free will look like? I say all of that to say this to you, though. There's going to be a form of mystery into this regardless, and I don't think that's a cop-out answer because the relationship between God has with us, even just thinking of the Trinity, there's no contradiction in it, but man, is it mysterious and how it works out. And I don't think we actually have to choose. It's a false dichotomy to assume that we either have free will or God is sovereign. Here's an example right now. If I were to ask you, does light travel in particles or waves? Which would you say? The correct answer is both, and science still has no idea how that's possible because things either travel in light or in particles or waves. Why does light travel in both, and how is that possible? Well, in the same way, I don't think we have to choose because I think the Bible gives us examples of both where you have free will and yet God is still sovereign over these things. The greatest example that I think of is actually in Acts 27. He's on a ship and everybody's worried about it, that it's going to die, but the Holy Spirit tells him, hey, no one's going to die. I'm actually going to look at the verse right now. I think it's it's in chapter 27 and verses 24. It says, do not be afraid, Paul. You must stand before Caesar, and behold, God has granted you all those who sail with you. So take heart, men, for I have faith in God that this is exactly what will be happen. This is what I've been told. But we must run aground on some island. And so these guys hear it, it's like, okay, great, we're not going to die. But just verses later, these dudes try to get out of the ship, and then this is Paul's response to them as as some of the sailors are going to hop on a small boat to get off the ship so they don't have to be shipwrecked. Paul says this to the centurion, the leader. He says, unless these men stay in the ship, you cannot be saved. Well, which one is it? I thought God said he's going to save us. It's both. God is saying, no, here's my sovereignty. I know what's going to happen. But you still have a choice in that. And I know this can get a little bit more complicated when it comes to salvation and what that looks like. But what I would say is I'd argue that I'm a compatibilist. I think they go together. And I don't think I'm cheapening either view. Here's the other thing to think about. If it really is one or the other, they're both equally crippling. Like, think about it. If it's purely God's sovereignty, he's just in control of everything. You have no option and you're just predetermined to everything. Why do you do anything? Why care about your friend that isn't a Christian? Why evangelize? It's unlivable. And then the opposite. If it's truly your free will, good luck. To think that your salvation and the salvation of others is up to your decision, that's crippling. The beautiful thing is that God is sovereign over these things. And look, as somebody that I'm far more reformed than I am Arminian on these things. Yes, God is sovereign over these things, and our free will plays a role. And I'm going to emphasize on his sovereignty on these things because he's creator of all things. But he somehow allows me to play a role in this. And I actually think that's really beautiful because the question here, I think what we're all wrestling with is God really just then? Because if he is sovereign, and it seems like I don't even have an option, how could he possibly be just? And all of Christianity banks on the cross, and we know this. But when you go to the cross, here's God himself completely in control of the situation. Christ even says, no one takes up my life. And then he pleads out to God and says, if there's any other way. And yet there isn't. So God has his hand in the cross. God's in control of the cross. What does that tell me now? So a God that's willing to die for the sins of others, ultimately for justice, like that's what he's doing. He's saying because sin has to be paid for, there has to be justice. He's enacting justice to the nth degree, right? He said, I'm actually going to take it on myself. That's how important justice is to me. That same God is not going to somehow be unjust in the way he deals with us when it comes to our lives and whether he's given us enough information or do we have a free will or not. I'm of the opinion that our understanding of free will is probably a little skewed. I think we have a very Western post-Enlightenment understanding of free will. I think you have a choice. I think God gives you a sense of libertarian free will that he can hold you accountable to. But the beauty of his sovereignty is that we can rest in the fact that your salvation is even of your own, that it was granted to you, and that he's given you the faith to believe in him that way. So I hope that answers some of your questions. Again, I just don't think you have to. The beautiful thing is on both sides of the church, on whoever, look, we still fundamentally agree on the gospel. We still believe that evangelism is important. We still believe that we play a role. It's just a question of how that relationship comes together. I don't think this is something that you need to kind of like land on and make sure that everyone agrees with you. Like we can link arms as brothers and sisters in Christ, different views of this, knowing that his sovereignty is a good thing, and that we can live in light of that, knowing that our choices do make a difference. I hope that helps.